So, we resume with network flows, and as you have noted that we have taken care of that thing that I raised at the beginning of my lecture, that you need some time to go around in the campus. So, now that is arranged for, I guess. Right. So, in the first part of this lecture on network flows, what is the thing being passed around? So, in the first part, what we looked at was various types of paths, and then we saw that the problem varies as you change the way that you compute path cost. Right? Like when we talked about the shortest path problem, we talked about adding up the edges, the cost of the edges to get the cost of the path. Then when we looked at the egg transportation problem, there the path cost was defined in a slightly different way, because the probabilities or the fractions of the eggs that get broken with each edge on the path is not really additive, right? And then we saw that if you define the path cost as the max of the costs on the edges, then we get something like MST, right? Max or min, then you get MST or the maximum spanning tree and so on. But we always talked about one path, right? Now, what we are going to look at is counting of paths. How many paths do we have from S to T? Now, in this particular graph, if you can see the red and blue links, this one probably shows it better. You can see that there are two paths from S to T. Now, the question is that why should we be interested in counting the number of paths? So, if you say that I want to send something from S to T, but the path through which I send it, that path is occupied by what I am sending it. And then I ask that, then how many can I send from S to T? So, if I have k such disjoint paths, that is k paths which do not share any edge, then I can say k items at a time from S to T, each following a path of its own. So, that is the basis of flows. So, we can think as flows as counting the number of paths that I have, edge disjoint paths that I can have from a vertex S to a vertex T. But this makes a fundamental assumption which is not what we always want to make. That is, when you are saying counting, you are saying then that the flow value has to be an integer, right? That is, it has to be either 1 or 2 or depending on the number of paths that we have. And we can break up edge of capacity 2 into two different edges only if we assume that that 2 is an integer. But if we had an edge whose weight was 2.5, what would we have done? Now, we cannot break it up into 2.5 edges. How will we do it? Then that counting argument does not hold anymore. Though you could actually scale up the problem by multiplying 2.5 by 10, and for that matter all the edge capacities with 10. So, you are just changing the unit of the capacity, and then you get an integer problem. In flow problems, you have algorithms which are dedicated for integer flows, and you have flow problems which are, we have algorithms which are applicable to flows in networks where the edge cost can be any arbitrary real number. Now, just like we saw a very important property of the spanning trees, we will see that there is a very similar kind of properties, except that there we were looking at the max of the edges or the mean of the edges on that cut. Here we will look at the sum of the edges on the cut. So, let's see the same property. You see that it's the same graph that I had drawn there. So, we are saying that suppose I partition the set of vertices into a set Q and a set Q dash. So, this, the vertices on this side is Q, the vertices on this side is Q dash, and these are the edges like this one, this one, this one and this one are the edges which constitute what is called a cut. A cut which separates Q from Q dash. Now, if you look at the edges on this, and then I say that the maximum flow from S to T, where S belongs to Q and T belongs to Q dash, cannot exceed the sum of these capacities. So, the sum of these capacities is what? 4 plus 4 plus 6 plus 5. So, I am saying that you can never have a flow from S to T which exceeds this. Why? Why not? Why can't we have more flow? By the way, let me take a quick poll on this. How many of you have actually gone through algorithms on maximum flows? So that is the reason. So I need to get down to more basics, right? Right. So let me first say what is a flow. So you think of this network as a network of pipes, right? They are pipes like pipelines. No, maybe pipelines for transporting oil, right? S is a vertex and T is a vertex, right? Now, when I look at a particular path from S to T, let us say S to 2 to 4 to T, right? And I ask what is the maximum amount that I can flow from S to T along this path. So, let us take this particular path from S to T, maybe this path, right. So, now you see it is like that bandwidth, you know, this flow, the capacity is like bandwidth. So, the capacity from S to T is the S to 2 is the thickness of the pipe. So, that pipe's thickness is 6, this pipe's thickness is 6, this pipe's thickness is 2. But if I want to pump oil from one to the other, which one will become the bottleneck? 2. So, the flow that can go from S to T is 2, right. And now, if you look at another path, maybe what is the flow along this second path? 2. Now, can I pass 2 units of flow through this plus 2 units of flow through the other path? No. Why not? Because the link from 4 to T can only handle 2. So, when I am looking at the total flow from S to T, I am trying to figure out what is the maximum that I can push along various paths, right. Now, let me give me a moment. Yeah, clean this up. Now, when I am talking about maximum flow from S to T, then that is the flow that I can pump from S to T altogether, right, taking all paths into account. Unfortunately, here, because the bottleneck is here, so that is the maximum flow that is possible. Now, suppose I change it slightly, that suppose I change this to one moment. Now, suppose I change this to 8, right? Now, there are various options. So, I could send 6 units from here, right, and then I can split it up like 4 units from here. So, in this direction I send 4 units, and that 4 unit goes like this, and I send 2 units from this, the remaining 2 units goes like this, and then that goes here, right, and then I take another 2 units and make it go like this, right. In fact, I could probably do better. How much did I send? 4 and 2 and 2. So, that is maximum, right. So, this is the max flow here is 8. Now, the thing that we are trying to say in this thing is that if you take if you take Q as a subset of the vertices and S belongs here, Q dash is the remaining vertices and I have T here, and I am saying that in the graph let these be the edges which are going from S to T, like now I am saying that the flow from S to T cannot be more than the sum of these capacities, that is A plus B plus C. The flow cannot be more than this. Now, that is obvious, right, because any flow that goes from S to T will have to cross from Q to Q dash side. It has to go from this side to this side, right. Now, if it has to go from this side to this side, then the maximum capacity that can flow cannot exceed the sum of these 3 capacities, because how will the remaining amount go? If there is anything more that has to flow from S to T, it has to flow through some pipe, but I have already summed up the capacities of all the pipes from Q to Q dash, right. And this will hold for any cut that I take, any choice of Q and Q dash, where Q contains S and Q dash contains T, right. Now, this brings us to a very important theorem which is called the max flow min cut theorem. It says that the maximum flow from vertex S to vertex T in a graph is equal to the capacity of the minimum ST cut. Right? Let's try to digest what this says. It says that the maximum amount that can flow along all these paths from S through all these paths, the maximum amount that can flow to T is equal to the cut of minimum size. And this follows from the previous result. The previous result said that take any cut, then the flow from S to T cannot exceed the size of that cut, right? So, if you take cut 1, flow cannot exceed that. You take cut 2, flow cannot exceed that. You take cut 3, flow cannot exceed that. So, if you take the minimum of those cuts, flow cannot exceed that. But the max flow min cut theorem says that if you take the minimum cut, flow obviously cannot exceed that, but it can equal that, and it will equal that. That is, if you take the minimum cut, I know that the flow cannot exceed the size of that cut, because whatever is flowing has to flow from this side of the cut to that side of the cut. So, if I add up the capacities of the edges on that cut, then the flow cannot exceed that. But for the minimum cut, I can always find a flow which will equal that. That is what this max flow min cut theorem states, and the theorem was presented by Ford and Fulkerson. Any questions up to this point? Have I lost you? No? Good. Yes. You tell me the vertices in Q. Okay, so you are saying that, let me use a different color. Just give me a moment. You are saying that the cut is this one, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Then the maximum flow is 11.
Here the flow maximum, the capacity of the cut is 11.
Yes.
Yes.
So it is possible that large number of cut in network we can arrange. Then how we can find the or our cut is exactly or not? It is possible for the some nodes.
No, so
But
you
when
are
we have
asking me how do we find the minimum cut?
Yeah, exactly what is the possible flow? There is a different flow available on different cuts.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Now how we distinguish?
Yeah, so that is the algorithm that we are going to look at now.
Okay.
That is the algorithm which finds the maximum flow
Okay.
and also the minimum cut. So the same algorithm finds both. But this relationship has a very important significance, which I will come to later when we talk about NP completeness, and certificates for polynomial time verifiability. You will see that max flow min cut problem, which belongs to the polynomially solvable problems, this existence or the duality between the max flow and the min cut is a very important property. Right now, let's look at this particular example. In this example, the things that I have shown in the bracket, they are the flows in the max flow. And let's say that I have an algorithm which has computed that. We are going to come to that algorithm in a moment. So you can see 5 units are flowing through here, 5 units are flowing through here, though the capacity is 7, but I can only push 5 here. Then 5 is flowing from here, then 4 is flowing this way, this 5 plus the remaining 1 is flowing this way, so 6, and then 6 and 4 are merging and 10 is flowing here. So you can see the flow, right? Now, this flow obviously satisfies certain constraints, which I hope you all know, right? I mean, the flow coming into a node has to be equal to the flow leaving the node. And if you take any cycle, so people who are in computer science, electronics, you know this law, right? What are these laws called? Kirchhoff's laws, right? So it's the same thing. This is the same thing which we study in electrical under the garb of currents. It is the same thing which power system engineers have to solve. If you look at what takes place in the National Load Dispatch Center for the entire power grid of India, you continuously do what is called a load flow analysis. Load flow analysis is nothing but solving a flow problem, right? But there are some other parameters because it is AC, it's not DC. Here flows are DC, right? So there are certain other issues which come up, but they are also flow problems. So let's quickly take a look at the algorithm which can solve the flow problem. So, and the algorithm is delightfully simple. We define what is called an augmenting path. Now, at a given point of time, in some intermediate iteration of the algorithm, some flows are taking place through certain edges, right? So suppose I have an edge of capacity 6 and 2 units are flowing through it. Then the residual capacity of that edge is 4. Because it has capacity of 6, I am using only 2 and 4 units are left, right? So at a given point of time, I can reduce the network or the graph with the edge costs replaced by the residual capacities, because that is telling me how much is left on each edge. Now, if I can find a path from S to T in this graph with only the residual capacities, then how will I find the maximum amount that I can push through that? So I have found out in the graph, let's say that at some point of time, I have found out that there is a path from S to T through some, and the residual capacities, let's say, are 2, 3, 5, 4. Then how many units can I push from S to T along this path? 2, because I have to take the minimum of all these capacities, that is the bottleneck, right? If I push 2, what does the residual capacity of this become? 0. Residual capacity of this will become 1. Residual capacity of this will 3, and of this one 2, right? Now, because this is residual capacity is 0, so along this path I cannot push anything else. But if there is some other path like this, now I can push through that one, right? I can push flow like this. So the augmenting path algorithm does the following thing, that in every iteration it tries to find a path in the residual graph, that is the graph where edge capacities are replaced by the residual capacities. If it can find a path from S to T, it finds the minimum remaining capacity on the edges of that path and pushes that amount of flow from S to T, right, and revises the residual capacity on that path. Again it looks for a path from S to T, right, and you can show that this algorithm will always terminate. Why will it always terminate? That is very easy to show actually. Yes? Yes, because in every iteration, the residual capacities are monotonically decreasing and your flow value is monotonically increasing, right? And therefore, it cannot become, you cannot have infinite flow, right? So, because we know by the mean cut theorem that it can never exceed the size of the mean cut, right? So, it will eventually terminate. And Ford-Fulkerson's algorithm comes with a proof which shows that when it terminates, there will be a cut whose capacity will equal the flow, or rather the flow will equal the capacity of some cut. And then the max flow mean cut theorem says that this is the mean cut, that is the max flow, right? Now the question arises, so the algorithm as you can see is very simple. But the question arises is how many iterations are we going to need? And what is the complexity of each iteration? So what is the complexity of finding an S to T path? N log n. Is that right? All of you agree? Finding out the path, whether there a path from a node S to a node T in a graph, right? Can we do it with a depth first traversal? Can we do it with a depth first traversal? Right? If we do a depth first traversal, we'll know whether T is reachable from S. What is the complexity of a depth first traversal? Order of? Right? So in that time, in the order of E, we will be able to figure out whether there is a path from S to T. When we find there is a path, now you augment. What is the complexity of augmenting it? Finding out the minimum of the edge weights. How many edges can we have in the worst case? N minus 1. So order of N minus 1 to find out what is the augmenting value, and then again order of N minus 1 to subtract that from each of the edges to get the residual, revise the residual costs, right? So we know that each iteration is not very expensive. It is order of E plus all these things which are actually less than order of E. So we can ignore them, right? So the question boils down is how many iterations? How many iterations do we need? And as it turns out that if we don't do things smartly, then that can be really bad. Look at this particular example. So we start with the iteration and we are selecting augmenting paths or the paths from S to T in any arbitrary way. So let's say that in the first iteration we end up finding this path. Now how many units can we augment through that? 1. So the residual capacities will then become what? This will become 99. This will become 0. This will become 99. Right? And the flow directions are this. There is 1 unit flow in this, 1 unit flow in this, and 1 unit flow in this. Right? So after this, in the residual graph, do we have any path from S to T? Which path? Now see, the question is, okay, before we go into this, let me clear up one more doubt. Slightly modified example, but very loaded one. Now, if we choose this path first, what will the residual capacities become? This will become 1, this will become 0, this will become 0, right? Then is there any more augmenting paths? So, there is one S through 1 to T, right? That is this one. And how do we, so this will become 0, this will become 2. Any more paths? Looks like no, right? Looks like no, because this has become 0, this has become 0, right? So, this is 0, this is 0, this is 0. But if you look at the original network, which let me redraw here on this side, if you look at the original network, this was what we had. This had capacity of 2, 3, 1, 1, 1. Now, in what we have done so far, we are getting a flow of how much? 3, right? 2, 2, 2, 2. Because in what we did, we pushed 1 unit of flow like this, and we pushed 1 unit of flow like this. So, we got a total flow of 2, right? But as you can see from here, a flow of 3 is very much possible, because I can have 2 flowing like this, 1 flowing like this, 1 flowing this way, and then 3 flowing this way. So, flow of 3 is possible, right? So, then does the Ford-Fulkerson that algorithm, does it fail? Ford-Fulkerson's algorithm? So, the important thing to understand here is that on this edge, the flow that we had originally set was in this direction, right? Right? But actually what you can do is you can reverse that flow. You can say that no, what I want is that this flow will not go from 1 to 2, instead there will be a flow from 2 to 1, right? So, now that brings in a slight tricky thing into the algorithm, that when I am looking for a path from S to T, I will look at all the residual capacities edges with positive residual capacities, and for edges which have 0 residual capacity, if I am taking it in the direction opposite to the flow, then I will think that I can actually reverse that flow and therefore gain 2 units. So, let me try to explain what this means. Here is an edge. This had a capacity of 4, right? I am sending 2 units in this direction. So, in this direction, the residual capacity is 2. But suppose I want to push flow from J to I. Now, you see that I can actually think of this as I can reverse this 2 unit of flow, plus when I reverse this 2 unit, the pipe will become empty. And then if I push another 4 units, I can do that because this capacity has thickness of 4. So, it is not only going to reverse this 2 plus this 4. So, I can actually, I have residual capacity of 6 in this direction. So, if I look at the residual capacity in this direction, then that is 2 because my flow is 2. If I look at the residual capacity in this direction, then it is 6 because these 2 units I can reverse and then additionally I can push in 4 units. Right. Now, without complicating things any further, if you go through this algorithm, then you will see that the construction of the residual graph takes this into account, and then you can actually find out the path from S to T considering all these factors. Now, the thing that I want to show you here is that if you choose the augmenting paths in arbitrary way, that is, I choose my first path like this, then I choose my second path. After augmenting through this, I choose my second path like this, right. So, that what does it do? It reverses this 1 unit of flow, right, and 100 units, from 100 units 1 unit is flowing like this. So, now at this stage this has 99, this has 99, this has 99, this has 99, and now no more units is flowing through this. Again I can choose to augment along this, therefore, this will become 98, this will become 98, and this will become 1 in this direction, and the residual capacity in this direction will be 0. So, how many iterations are we going to need if we choose the paths in this way? About 100 or 200, right. Now, there is a thing which is written below, which is probably the most important thing in this whole discussion. It says that the complexity of the algorithm, if we choose these paths in an arbitrary way, is pseudo polynomial. What is pseudo polynomial complexity? Every complexity depends on the values of the inputs. So, let us look at the things that we have here. The terms in the complexity. what is this n? It is the number of vertices. What is this m? Number of edges. What is this u? U is the largest edge capacity. In this case, 100. Right? Now, if we had the complexity as nm, order nm, would we have called it a polynomial complexity or not? Order of n times m, is it polynomial? Polynomial. But when we have this u, which is this 100 in this case, then we are saying that it is not polynomial anymore. Why? This is a very subtle thing which you have to understand whenever you do an analysis of algorithms. See, complexity is always determined in terms of the input size, right? How many steps do I have to take? What is the time complexity that I am spending for a given input size? And all that is actually telling us how this complexity grows as my input size grows. So, if I take n from 10 to 100 to 1000 to 10,000 to 10 billion, how does the complexity grow with it? Does it grow linearly? Does it grow according to some polynomial, or does it grow exponentially? You know, those are the determining factors. Now, here if you look at the input size, n is the number of vertices. So, the size of the graph is given in terms of the number of vertices and number of edges, that is the input size. Now, u is what? It is the value of the largest capacity. But when you are taking the problem as an input, u is what? It is a number, right? To represent a number whose value is u, what is the size of the input? The number u can be represented in log u number of bits, right? Log u number of bits. If you take log u number of bits is the input size, let us say that is k, then k is the number of bits used to represent an edge weight. Then what does this become? O of n times m times 2 to the power of k, right? If you take a complexity which is order of u, where log of u equal to k, then it is equivalent to saying that this is order of 2 to the power of k. Now, what is your input size? Is it u or is it k? It is k, because you needed k bits to represent the input. So, when you are talking about this complexity nmu, it is not polynomial time, because u is an exponential in the input. We have to understand this, because otherwise you will say that 0-1 knapsack is polynomial time solvable. Why? Because the dynamic programming algorithm which you have definitely looked at for 0, 1 knapsack solves it in polynomial in the number of items, but there is a sack capacity which comes there as one of the complexity terms. Sack capacity. What is the sack capacity? It's a number. If the sack capacity is u, then the sack capacity is given to you in log u number of bits. So the complexity is term has a 2 to the power of k factor. That is why the algorithm that we use for solving 0, 1 knapsack using dynamic programming is not a polynomial time algorithm. Right? Any queries up to this point? So when you are looking at the complexity of algorithms, we are going to deal with it in a much larger extent in the classes that are to follow. You have to bear in mind that always compare with the size of the input. Professor PPC actually pointed out one thing, which let me repeat that so that we are sure that we are on the same page on that. He said that the Dijkstra's algorithm is actually very similar to an algorithm called A star, which is used in artificial intelligence. Right? But when we talk about Dijkstra's algorithm, we say it's polynomial time complexity. When we talk about A star, we say that it has exponential complexity. How can the same algorithm have two different complexities? Because their inputs are different. The input to the Dijkstra's problem is a graph which is given to you explicitly. The input to A star is a graph which is given implicitly. What do you mean by an implicit graph? So if you think of a 15 puzzle, have you seen 15 puzzle? You can move tiles around, and get the numbers into a certain order. So you can say that if you take any configuration of a 15 puzzle, then what are the adjacent configurations? The blank can move up, move down, move left, or move right. The blank moving up means that the one on top is being brought down. The blank actually does not move, but effectively it does. So you can define the entire state space of 15 puzzle by only providing these 4 operators. You say you are not giving the entire graph. You are not saying which is adjacent to which. You are telling it, given a state, how to find the adjacent states. That is an implicit representation of a graph, right? And therefore, because the input is implicit, from there to create the explicit graph as an exponential. And then if you look at the exponential graph and apply A star on that, that is same as Dijkstra's. But if you say my input size is just those 4 operators, then the size is the problem is specified succinctly, right? We shall see later, if time permits, that many of these problems can be specified succinctly, and then immediately for all these algorithms, their complexities will blow up. So the solution to the problem that we just now discussed, my intention of bringing that was to really get into this discussion of what is pseudo-polynomial complexity, and that it can change the way we look at things. But there is a very simple solution, simple in terms of implementation, but very non-trivial in proving that it works, which was developed independently by the people whose names appear here. They found out that if you choose to augment along shortest paths, And here by shortest we mean minimum number of edges, not looking at the edge capacities, minimum number of edges. So from S to T, the shortest paths are S1T and S2T. These are the two shortest paths. If you augment along shortest paths, then the number of iterations will go down from pseudo polynomial to polynomial. That is what is happening here, at least, that in the first iteration I am choosing this as the augmenting path and augmenting 100 units at one shot. Then in the next iteration I am choosing this as the augmenting path, augmenting 100 units at one shot, and then in 2 iterations we are done. There are no other augmenting paths, and 200 units is flowing from S to T, right? Right? So this is a nice improvement on the augmenting path algorithm, and it actually gives you the maximum flow in polynomial time. How much? I have time up to 5:30, right? 5:30. What is the norm time at which this ends? 5? Too many people are saying 5:15. Okay, good. So I have around 20 minutes time. You know, I don't want to eat up the time left out by the pedagogy sessions. So here are some examples of problems which don't look like flow problems, but they nicely reduce to flow problems. So we'll just see a couple of them as we go along. So let's look at this problem first, that we have a town which has R residents, there are Q clubs, and there are P political parties. And each resident is a member of at least one club and can belong to exactly one political party. Each club must nominate one of its members to represent it on the town's governing council, and we want to do it while ensuring that the number of council members belonging to a political party Pk is at most Uk, right? And we now ask, is it possible to find a council that satisfies this balancing property? So I'll show you for this one, and then for the next one I will give you some time to think over it. So what we do is we construct a graph like this. Observe what we do. So for each of the residents, how many residents do we have? I put a node for each resident, right? And then I put a node for each club, C1, C2. How many clubs do we have? CQ, right? And I also put vertices for the political parties, P1, P2, now what we do is we put in the memberships as the edges. So we know that each resident is a member of at least one club. So let's say this resident is a member of this club, some club here. This resident is member of only one club. Some resident here might actually be a member of all clubs, very social person. And then we have the political parties, and we are told that each member each person can belong to exactly one political party, at least on paper. So he is on this political party, this fellow is on this political party, this fellow is in this political party, and so on. Right? So that's the main portion of the graph. Now what we do, here is the trick. So we put a special node S here, and we put a special node T here, connect this to all vertices in S, connect this to all vertices in P. Now what we are going to do is, we are going to look for the maximum flow from S to T. But while we do that, we want to first see what should be the edge capacities. Now, these are all individual memberships, right? So we put an individual capacity of 1 on each of these. These have all capacity of 1, right? Now, how many members can a particular club put in the council? How many members can a club nominate? 1. So you think of it in this way, that we give each club a token, and that token the club can place on any of these RIs. That is a nomination paper, right? So what are we going to put as the capacities here? 1. Why? Because every club has only one vote. That is the vote that the club can put on one of these residents, right? What about these? How many members can a political party have in the council? So this will be U1, this will be U2, this will be UP. Right? Then we solve the max flow problem. Now, can you tell me that how will I know that such a council exists or not? How? So if every club can pass their token and have their representative in the council without violating the constraint that a political party should not have more than political party PK should not have more than UK members. What does that mean? That means I must be able to have a unit of flow from each of these. Everybody is able to nominate their nomination. So if this one say flows through like this unit flows like this into this person, and then this person goes into the council, then club 1 is happy because one of their members is now there in the council, right? For club 2, let's say club 2 nominates this person, then this person gets, now club 2 is happy, right? If all the clubs are happy, then you have solved the problem, right? So we look for at least Q, where Q is the number of clubs. Is it okay? Questions? I am sure I have lost all of you. End of day, long day. Year really long, yes. I would have given up long ago. You have lot of tenacity. But let us end with a problem which is quite funny. And though this is called the baseball elimination problem, because this came up in textbooks which were written by professors in USA, where baseball is a very important sport. But it applies equally well to cricket. And used to be something, at least in my childhood, I remember that Indian team was always in this kind of a situation. That is, in a tournament, at some point of time, you try to figure out, can India still win? And then you figure out that yes, it can win if Bangladesh beats South Africa, Bermuda beats West Indies, and weird combinations. Then you say that yes, that is possible. So let's see a formulation of this problem, and then let's see how do we solve this problem without counting out all those possibilities, however weird those possibilities may be. So there is a tournament where every team is playing every other team, and not just once, several times. So at some time, we want to find out whether team X can still win. Now, what is the state of the system? X has already won W number of matches. So X has managed to win W of its matches, and therefore it has no, not exactly, I am wrong. W is not the number of matches which it has won. It is the number of matches that it will end up winning if we take all the matches it has won, plus assuming that it is going to win all its remaining matches. So when we are trying to be optimistic about X, we really want to be optimistic and say that it will win all its remaining other matches, right? So it will win all its remaining matches, and if it does so, then at the end of the tournament it will end up with W wins. So W actually includes number of matches it has won plus number of matches it still has left, right? That is the total W. X1 through Xn are the other teams. X is not among them. These are the other teams, and I want to decide the matches that they play in such a way that none of them can reach W wins, or none of them can reach more than W wins, right? That's what I want to do. I want to find out, can the Xi's, the other teams, the decision of their matches, can it happen in a way that none of them are able to reach or exceed W number of wins? So for that I need to look at how many matches are remaining between every pair Xj and Xk. So I am given that for the remaining games between Xj and Xk, there are Ajk such games left, right? And Wk has already won, or the team K has already won Wk number of matches, right? Now this can be solved using a max flow problem. How? So first important thing is to understand is what will be our vertices. So one thing is very easy to see, that we will have the teams. So, let us say this is xj, this is some xi. Now, here what we have is the second set of vertices are the team pairs, that is, which pairs are still to play. They have some remaining games. So, let us say that I have yij, so on. So, what I do is, again I add a vertex s and t here. Now, for yij, these are the matches being played between xi and xj. So, for every node yij, I put an edge from xj and I put a node from edge from xi, right. And similarly, these are the other edges, let us say. So, each of these nodes will get two incoming edges, because these represent pairs. So, for a pair of teams A and B, it will receive an edge from team A and an edge from team B, right. And I will put edges from S through all of these and from all of these through T. Now, let me write down what are the edge capacities, and then we will open up the discussion that why this will work. This is W minus Wj, this is W minus Wi, and so on, and this is Aij. And these will all be infinite capacity edges. Yeah. Now, can you tell me what am I doing here? These are all directed edges, by the way. Can you tell me what's happening? And how solving the max flow on this will actually tell us whether X can still win. So, first let us try to decipher why am I putting W minus Wj here. I want to restrict team J to yes, I do not want xj to get more than W wins, because then X will lose. I want to constrain xj to at most W total number of wins. How many wins does it already have? Wj. So, I do not want to give it more than W minus Wj wins. So, I am constraining the number of wins on that edge. No, I am saying that if it will win, I mean, if two teams reach the same number of wins, then both will win. So, I am happy with that. They both qualify or whatever. And then I put this Aij here. Why? What is this Aij? Number of remaining matches between I and j. Right? So, obviously, the number of matches between I and j is upper bounded. The number of wins between teams I and j, number of matches is upper bounded by Aij. So, I put it there. Now, can you tell me that if I find out a max flow, what am I trying to do? I am trying to see whether I can satisfy or I can play out all these matches and get results for all of them in such a way that nobody exceeds, no team xj exceeds w minus wj wins out of these matches. That's what I am trying to do. So, can you tell me that once I find the max flow, what am I going to compare that with? Because if you can tell me what that I will write there, then I will understand that you have all understood what is happening. See, what I am trying to do here is, I want to see whether all the remaining matches can be played out in such a way that none of the teams exceed that x number of wins, right? But the bottom line is that I should be able to play out all the matches. If all the matches are not played out, then I am not getting anywhere. And if all the matches are played out, then what will be the maximum flow? If all the matches can be played out, what will be the maximum flow? Sigma of Aij. Because Aij is the remaining matches between I and j. So, if I sum over I and j, Aij, that is, if I count all the remaining matches over all pairs of teams, that is sigma of Aij. That is the total number of matches remaining. If I can get a maximum, and the flow cannot exceed that, because this cut has size of sigma of Aij. So, the flow cannot be more than that. But if I get a flow of this size without violating these constraints, that means all the matches have been played out, but there is a way to play them out in such a way that none of the teams have got more than x number of wins, right? And so, if the max flow is equal to sigma of Aij, then I know that my team x can still win. Right? I think in a day we have pumped too much, right? So, we will call it a day, and thank you very much.